There is a specific kind of loneliness that has no name in any language, but if you grew up with an emotionally immature parent, you know exactly what it feels like. It is the loneliness of being in the same room as someone who is supposed to love you and feeling completely alone anyway. It is the loneliness of talking to a parent who is physically present but emotionally elsewhere, of crying and having no one notice, of celebrating and having no one truly see what it means to you. It is the loneliness of a child who learns very early that their feelings are too much, too complicated, too inconvenient for the adult who is supposed to help them make sense of those feelings. If you grew up with a parent like this, you learned to read the room before you entered it. You learned to manage your parents' emotions better than they ever managed yours. You learned that love was something you could earn if you were good enough, quiet enough, convenient enough, but never something you could simply receive for being who you were. And if you are watching this video, you have probably spent years wondering if what you experienced even counts as harm, because from the outside, your childhood might have looked fine. Your parent wasn't violent, they provided food, shelter, the basics. They probably even thought they were doing a good job. But something essential was missing, and that absence shaped you in ways you are only now beginning to understand. This video is for you. Every word of it. 1. The neglect that no one else could see. Emotional neglect is invisible. That is what makes it so difficult to name, so hard to heal from, and so easy for others to dismiss. Your parent fed you, clothed you, sent you to school, made sure you were physically safe, and because those basics were met, the world looked at your family and saw nothing wrong. But you were starving in a way no one could see. An emotionally immature parent is not capable of attuning to your inner world. They cannot track your emotional states, cannot mirror your feelings back to you, cannot help you understand what is happening inside you when you feel scared or sad or angry or overwhelmed. Their emotional development stopped at some point long before they became a parent, and what they are capable of giving you is limited by what they never learned to do for themselves. So you grew up in a house that looked stable, with a parent who looked functional, but something fundamental was missing. That something was emotional presence. The capacity to see you, to hold your feelings, to validate that your interior experience was real and important. And when that is missing, a child does not just feel sad. A child begins to wonder if their inner life matters at all. This is what psychologists call emotional neglect, not the absence of care, but the absence of attunement. And the cruelest part of this kind of neglect is that it leaves no visible scars. You cannot point to it. You cannot prove it. And because your parent provided the basics, you grow up thinking you have no right to feel the way you feel, which makes the wound deeper and harder to heal. Intense. 2. The child who learned to read the room before entering it. Children of emotionally immature parents become experts in something they should never have had to learn: hypervigilance. You learned to monitor your parents' emotional state constantly, to detect shifts in mood, to predict when they might withdraw, become irritable, or emotionally collapse. You learned this because your safety, not physical safety necessarily, but emotional safety, depended on it. An emotionally immature parent is emotionally unstable in ways that are subtle but constant. Their mood determines the emotional weather of the entire house, and because they cannot regulate their own emotions, you learned to regulate yourself around them. You became the emotional thermostat. You walked into a room and immediately scanned. Are they okay? Are they upset? Is it safe to need something right now? Should I make myself smaller? Should I perform happiness so they feel better? This is not a skill you were taught explicitly. It is a survival adaptation that children develop when they are responsible for an adult's emotional state instead of the other way around. And the cost of this hypervigilance is profound. You never got to be a child who could simply exist without monitoring, adjusting, performing. Your nervous system was set to high alert before you even understood what that meant. And here is the part that most people do not talk about. That hypervigilance does not turn off when you leave childhood. It follows you into every relationship, every job, every social interaction. You are still scanning the room, still reading faces for signs of displeasure, still shrinking yourself to keep the peace. What started as survival in childhood became the only way you know how to exist in the world, and it is exhausting in a way that is hard to explain to people who never had to live like that. Melancholy. 3. You were loved for what you did, not for who you were. Emotionally immature parents are incapable of unconditional love, not because they are cruel, but because they are limited. Their love is transactional. It arrives when you meet their needs, when you make them feel good, when you perform the version of yourself that is easiest for them to handle, and it withdraws when you don't. You learned this very early, when you were compliant, helpful, easy. When you made them proud or made their lives simpler, you received warmth, attention, approval. But when you had needs of your own, when you were upset or struggling or inconvenient, the love evaporated. Not because it was never real, but because it was conditional on you being a certain way. And children can feel that conditionality like a threat even when they cannot name it. This taught you something devastating, that your worth is not inherent. It's something you have to earn again and again by being useful, agreeable, impressive, or emotionally convenient. And the child who learns this becomes an adult who cannot rest, because resting means risking the withdrawal of love. You learned to perform your worth, and the performance never stops. The deepest damage of conditional love is that it makes you distrust your own value. Somewhere deep inside, you believe that if people really knew you, if they saw the parts of you that are messy, needy, difficult, or simply human, they would leave. Because that's what your parent taught you, not with words, but with the pattern of their presence and absence, their warmth and their coldness, their love that came and went depending on who you were willing to be for them.
4. You were never truly seen. There is a kind of loneliness that is worse than being alone, and it is the loneliness of being with someone who cannot see you. An emotionally immature parent looks at you and sees not a whole person with an interior life, but a reflection of themselves, a source of supply for their needs, a character in the story they are telling about their own life. They do not have the capacity to hold your reality as separate from theirs. When you tried to share your feelings with them, they made it about themselves. When you were hurt, they felt attacked. When you were happy in a way that did not include them, they felt threatened. They could not sit with your emotional experience without turning it into something that served or threatened their own. And over time, you learned not to bring your real self to them, because there was no one there capable of receiving it. This is what psychologists mean when they talk about a parent who cannot mentalize, who cannot hold in their mind the reality that you are a separate person with your own feelings, your own needs, your own inner world that is not about them. And when a child grows up without being mentalized, without being truly seen, they begin to doubt whether their inner life is real at all. You learned to translate yourself into a version your parent could handle. You learned to hide the parts of you that were too much or not enough. You learned that being fully yourself was not safe because your parent could not hold the complexity of who you actually were. And the loneliest part of this is that you did it so well, you hid so carefully, that even you began to lose track of who you were underneath the performance. 5. The constant invalidation. One of the clearest signs of an emotionally immature parent is how they respond to your feelings. Not with curiosity, not with empathy, not even with concern, but with dismissal, minimization, or outright denial. You are being too sensitive. You are overreacting. That is not how it happened. You are making a big deal out of nothing. This is called invalidation, and when it happens consistently, it does not just hurt your feelings in the moment. It teaches you that your feelings are wrong, that your perception of reality is unreliable, that your emotional responses are excessive or inappropriate. You internalize the message that what you feel is not valid, and over time, you stop trusting yourself. Children need their feelings reflected back to them by a caregiver who can say, in 1,000 small ways, "I see what you are feeling, and it makes sense." That reflection is how children learn that their inner life is real, that their emotions are information rather than problems, that they can trust their own experience. But an emotionally immature parent cannot give that reflection. They are too threatened by feelings, yours or their own, to sit with them without needing to shut them down. So you learned to do it for them. You learned to shut your own feelings down before they could inconvenience anyone. You learned to question whether you were overreacting, whether you had a right to feel hurt, whether your sadness or anger was justified or just proof that something was wrong with you. And that self-invalidation, that constant second-guessing of your own emotional reality, becomes a reflex that is extraordinarily hard to undo. 6. Performing to keep the peace. If your parent was emotionally immature, you did not get to simply be yourself. You had to become whoever they needed you to be in order to keep the relationship stable. This is not a conscious choice a child makes. It's an adaptation that happens automatically when a child realizes that their authentic self is too much, too difficult, or too threatening for the parent to handle. So you learned to perform. You learned to hide your needs, to suppress your feelings, to present only the parts of yourself that your parent could tolerate. Maybe you became the responsible one, the caretaker, the child who never caused problems. Maybe you became the entertainer, the one who made everything lighter, who used humor to diffuse tension. Maybe you became invisible, the child who took up as little space as possible so as not to burden the parent who was already overwhelmed. Whatever version of yourself you learned to perform, the cost was the same. You lost access to your authentic self. The real you, with needs and feelings and complexity, had to go underground because there was no one who could receive that version of you without it causing a problem. And the tragedy is that you performed so well for so long that even you started to believe the performance was who you really were. Now, as an adult, you still do it. You still read the room, still adjust yourself to fit what others need, still hide the parts of you that feel too much or too vulnerable or too inconvenient. And the exhaustion of it is something you carry in your body without even realizing it, because performing for emotional safety became so automatic that you forgot you were doing it at all. 7. The patterns you carry now. Growing up with an emotionally immature parent does not just affect your childhood. It shapes the adult you become in ways that are specific, predictable, and deeply painful until you understand where they came from. You might have an anxious attachment style, a constant low-level fear that the people you love will leave, that you are too much or not enough, that connection is something you have to earn and can lose at any moment. This is not paranoia. This is your nervous system remembering what it learned in childhood, that love is conditional and safety is not guaranteed. You might be a people pleaser, someone who cannot say no, who prioritizes everyone else's needs above your own, who feels responsible for other people's emotions in ways that leave you constantly depleted. This is not kindness. This is the child who had to manage an adult's emotional state in order to survive, and that child is still trying to keep everyone around them okay because it feels like life or death. You might struggle with emotional numbness, a kind of disconnection from your own feelings that makes it hard to know what you want, what you need, or even what you feel at any given moment. This is not apathy. This is what happens when a child learns that their feelings don't matter and shuts them down so thoroughly that they lose access to them entirely. And you might find yourself drawn again and again to people who are emotionally unavailable, who cannot see you, who replicate the exact dynamic you grew up in. This is not bad judgment. This is your system seeking what's familiar, trying to resolve an old wound by choosing people who activate it, hoping unconsciously that this time it will end differently. 8. What healing actually requires. If you grew up with an emotionally immature parent, the question you are probably asking is, how do I heal from this? And the answer is not simple, but it is real. Healing is possible. It requires time, effort, and a willingness to see what was done to you clearly, but it is possible. The first step is grieving. You have to let yourself feel the loss of what you did not receive, the attunement, the validation, the unconditional love, the parent who could have seen you and did not. This grief is not self-pity. It is the necessary acknowledgement that something essential was missing, and that absence shaped you in ways that were not your fault. The second step is learning to reparent yourself. You have to become for yourself what your parent could not be, someone who attunes to your feelings, who validates your reality, who holds your inner world with care. This is not about blaming your parent or cutting them off, although some people need to create distance in order to heal. This is about taking responsibility for giving yourself what you needed then and still need now. The third step is unlearning the adaptations that kept you safe as a child, but now keep you small. The hypervigilance, the people-pleasing, the performing, the hiding, all of it made sense when you were young and had no other options. But you are not that child anymore. You have choices now, and part of healing is learning that you can be your full self with all your needs and feelings and complexity, and the people who cannot handle that are not your people. The fourth step is building relationships with people who are emotionally mature, people who can see you, who can hold your reality without making it about themselves, who love you not for what you do, but for who you are. This will feel unfamiliar at first because it is not what you learned to expect, but it is what you deserve, and learning to receive it is part of the healing. And the final step, if you choose it, is deciding whether and how to stay in relationship with your parent. Some people are able to maintain connection while protecting themselves emotionally. Some people need to step back, either temporarily or permanently, in order to heal. There is no right answer here. The only question that matters is, what do you need in order to become whole? If you recognized yourself in this video, I need you to know something. The loneliness you felt as a child, the sense that something was missing, the feeling that you were too much or not enough, none of that was true. What was true is that your parent was not capable of seeing you, and that limitation was theirs, not yours. You were never too sensitive. Your feelings were never too much. Your need to be seen and held and validated was not a flaw. It was a basic human need, and the fact that it was not met does not mean you were unworthy of it. It means your parent was not equipped to give it, and that is a tragedy, but it is not a reflection of your value. The patterns you carry now, the hypervigilance, the people-pleasing, the hiding, the self-doubt, those are not who you are. Those are what you had to become in order to survive a childhood that required you to be smaller than you were. And now, as an adult, your work is not to fix yourself because you were never broken. Your work is to unlearn what you had to learn, to reclaim what you had to hide, and to finally give yourself permission to take up the space you were always meant to occupy. You are deeper than you know, and you were always enough.